All right, so hey everybody, what's up? It's your boys from the Double S Club, Andrew and Rohan. Say what up, bro?
You know what it is.
Yeah. So this week we're riding just a boys club, no ladies allowed. So we're kind of just going over I guess a continuation from one of our previous topics about women proposing to men and how the dichotomy is kind of changing and how everything breaks down. So behind the scenes, we were discussing about some of the changes on what is being, I guess, downloaded to the next generation and how the dating dynamics go. So
Yeah.
let Andrew kind of fill you in on what we were discussing.
Well, basically, it's like you think the landscape is changing, and I think it's starting from the grassroots of like the beginning. Well, it's Cam Newton, and I'll leave the description in it later. But basically, he was having a discussion with his daughter. She's 14, and they were talking about dating, and he was saying to her that who should pay for the first date? She says him. He says obviously because he asked me out on a date, and he says yes, that's correct. That's old school thinking. That's general. But he also implemented a really, really, I don't know if it's smart, I don't know if it's dumb. You leave it in the comments and you tell us, but I think it's actually interesting. He said to her, don't think of it that way. Think of it as you paying for the meal. And he says she looked at him strange, but he said, why? He says, because if you pay for the entire meal, you are sending the indication that it's not about your money. It's about your time, your energy, and the person I actually want to be with. And he says, it's about if you can. He says, sometimes it's good to spoil, and especially on the first date, set that principle, because then you don't have to worry about nothing else for the rest. And I think it's something we definitely should discuss.
I think it's a little interesting, and I guess uh as of late I've been taking more of a traditionalism role in it. And I'm like, I respect where Cam is coming from on that aspect, and I'm not saying no.
Yeah.
I think the biggest concern, and I think the point that he's trying to get at, is that there's a lot of women, unfortunately, that are in that impressionist assumption, right? So kind of like how she responded to me, like, of course he should pay, da 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 da. It's just like, I get the empowerment statement of saying, well, you should be prepared to pay, right?
Yeah.
And
that's true. If you ask a woman out at a date, gentlemen, you should always have the pocket to pay for it.
well, I think both parties should be in a position to pay, right? And what I say about this is that even though the men in most cases are the ones who are initializing the date, and as a result, tradition would say that you started it, don't write a
He
check.
expanded upon that too.
Yeah,
he expanded upon the traditionalism.
Yeah, so it's kind of like don't write a check you can't cash kind of thing, right? So don't ask your girl out and be like, all right, cool, we're gonna go Dutch and all that sort of stuff. That should be an option, not an expectation. But women should be in a position to say, hey, you know what? I'm going out. I should at least have the kind of money to support what I am doing. So it's like,
that's true.
If I'm going out on a date with somebody, it's not like I'm gonna take a girl on my first date to like a McDonald's. Nothing against McDonald's, huge franchise, they make a lot of money.
Bro, we ain't 14 anymore. We've been there.
Well, yeah, and like I'm not here dogging anybody because from a business perspective, McDonald's is a good company, but that's not the point. It's to be expected that someone's going to take me out. So if I was on the reciprocating aspect of it and saying I'm going somewhere with someone, I would expect to ideally have the money for what I would assume would take care of my end, right?
True.
So if something happens, or if you're caught off guard, or the situation goes beyond what it is, you can contribute. Because sometimes it's just like, yo, you're gonna take the girl for a meal, and that was your thought process as a man, right? Some people have weak game. Let's just keep it simple. And then it's just like the day continues, and the man budgeted for maybe a couple $100 to be like, yeah, I'm going out, and then we're having a great time. You're running critical on your allocated funds.
No, trust me, we've all been there and no one tried to stretch a date. Like, I feel you.
Yeah, because like it could be going good, right? Like you can do an afternoon date or whatever, and then it expands and it goes in late, and it's always a difficult aspect. As much as it's good for a male to be able to be like, yo, I have different levels to make sure that I can get through the day and be able to cater to it accordingly. And mans, you should do that when you're investing in an event like that. But it would be nice as a guy in a traditional sense who normally has all those things set out, that if the woman's just like, hey, you know what, at certain levels I can pay my own way, that is nice. So I get where Cam is coming in and saying you should be ready to contribute to the event in question, the date. And also to challenge that mentality, being like, at some point you're gonna have to validate your worth in this equation. So even if it's like, hey, I'm not expecting you to be able to match with tit for tat, but you should be in a position to contribute or participate or even reciprocate. Hey, he's taking me out for a couple of dates. It'd be nice if it'd be like, hey, you know what?
The one thing,
I haven't seen you for a while. It might not be, the keg or Baton Rouge, but you know what? Let me take you to one of the local high-end ice cream places, or like Dimitri's or something.
Not even that, bro. What happens to girl pulling up on you on your job or something like that, bring you a little something to eat just because she shows she cared about you? You don't have to go all that far, bro.
I mean, that's
little small stuff or little gestures like that go way, way far, bro.
That's down the road. That's down the road. I would think it's a little cringe if I just started dating a girl and then she showed up at my workplace. But that's
no. I see what your point. No. I spoke too soon on that one.
Right. I'm talking about the initial courting period. So it's coming in equality, and I guess this is a good way to segue into some of the things that I was thinking about, because I was actually perusing through social media, and I came across some activity.
Stalking down the net.
What?
I said you were doing the stalk down the net.
I mean, aren't we all stalking down the net?
Yeah,
we're on lockdown, so you need something to amuse yourself. But so it kind of triggered the thought process, because we were discussing recap from last week. The type of women that are proposing to men, and we discussed some highlights, including saying how we are seeing it happen more so from high value women who are like, hey, they're the career oriented or the ones that have committed to life, and they've kind of put themselves in, I guess, in their opinion, the same spectrum of where men are, like the empowered woman. So they're going a step beyond and kind of proposing to men and going through. And then we brought up the concept of being like, whether or not it's going to be a trend. But one of the things that we were came my thought process was just like, where exactly is this coming from in regards to what's putting women in this position to be, I guess, supercharged to try and.
Well, they super saying it for she's. Yeah, I see your point, but I'll add to this. I think what's happening to this is the male roles in most of our life. Like, we can put not necessarily a timeline on this, but I kind of alluded to this the last time. There's, because of the system, because of all the other things that are in the way, like, women outnumber men. Like, what is it now? 3-1? Yeah, like, I don't know exactly what the ratio is, but I think it's like 3-1 now. It's a shortage. It's an actual shortage on good representation on what males are. So women themselves have had to take on those roles in exponential amounts right now. You have girls that are literally like not even thinking about themselves with a male dynamic. Like, he's not if he's with me, he's my partner. He's not like, you know what I mean? Like, we're not getting into this for me to be submissive in any way, kind of thing. Like, that's a movement now. Like, girls flat out see themselves as not only equal, but a lot of them see themselves as higher. And it comes down to how this dynamic forms in a relationship. Do the men have the, like, for lack of better words, balls to actually step up to some of these women? And I don't think yes. I think we've raised a lot of these young men down to be, for lack of a better words, a little bit pussy. So now when these hyper, super girls get out there, like, we ain't even gonna call them aggressive. We just gonna call them women. Like, they're really about their shit. They're about their life. They're about their business. They're about their money. a lot of these young boys, when they get to that point, because the maturation point for our maturity is a little, like, it's a little longer. It takes us a bit. When we get to that point, we roll. But a lot of these girls are way more mature than us at like 14, 17, 16. They've had to deal with the world. They've had to deal with, like, yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I'm saying their issues compared to our issues, and then tied to the fact that they don't have strong representation of male kind around them, it turns them into this hyper aggressive nature. I think it's just the ingredients. Like the recipes of life is just creating these women to be so much more than that what was expected from the last generation.
Question though, if I'm recaling what you're saying the absence of male influence on these women, or are you saying the absence of male influence on the males?
In society, no, both. I think it's society. I think it's societies in general. Like the lack of actual. I'm sorry.
They still exist. Like
no, I know you're saying that, but it's 3-1. Think about the ratios of how many women. Like I come from a household, dog, where it was 6 women in the house to 2 men.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandfather wasn't around. My father wasn't around. Like literally, we were shaped by the women that were around us. That was it.
Yeah, but
as like, much as
I spoke to you on that last week, and you kind of leveraging the same thing, and you're saying that at risk of males being influenced by women, then that should make a direct correlation. And you made the example again this weekend that you were influenced by many women, yet you didn't get turned out in a hypersensitive state.
Yes, because I didn't show the example of it. I've had a great group of example of men to actually show up in my life that weren't in my life. Like I've showed the example. Ainsworth Morgan, my big brother, became my teacher, then becoming my mentor later on in life, helped with dramatic amounts. Like he was a huge stopgap because I didn't have my dad around. I didn't have somebody like him showing me what it was like to see a black man run his own business, come from a professional football background, and then go to teaching. Literally changed my entire perspective on what males could do. Like it changed everything.
I'm still confused on your point.
No, I'm saying without me actually meeting Ainsworth, I would have only had the female influence in my life. And then I might have been a little bit more like I still carry far too, like my dad always said to me, he's like, bro, you're nothing like us. You're so much like your mom. Like you don't have any of my mannerisms. You don't have none of the boys. Like the way me and my dad talk is a completely different interaction. Not that I have a relationship as I'm older, right? But it's a completely different interaction. So I can say that it does have a general, like the way you're affected. A lot of these, like I see it in the way these girls like carry themselves. I hear it in the way a lot of them talk. Like they do not respect a lot of these. They find them weak. This new generation of men, like they flat out just find them weak. They don't even see that they're on the same level as them. And to some degree, I agree with them. Like to some small degree, I have to agree with them then. Because the girls nowadays are the ones taking charge. They're moving shit forward. You see it every day. Women don't care now, fam. They're not asking for no permission. Look at the cancel movement and in the general parts of culture, bro. They will literally cancel your ass at a moment's notice if they feel you're not even moving towards their energy. I think there's a deficiency of strong male representation. And because of that fact, women have stepped up their game to a point now where they're on the same line. They're willing to propose.
Yeah.
They're willing to.
Yeah, but the point that I'm trying to make is that if like the society, we're kind of at a critical aspect because there's an absence of male influence, but like it's not like there's a cry for it.
And that's true. That's also true.
So
I think that's
go ahead.
No, what I was going to say is I think that that's also added to the fact that we've also been in charge for so long, and we've been at the forefront for so long that women don't give a crap what we have to say. Even if there was a group of men out there, in large amounts, I don't think they want to hear from us. I think they want us to take a back seat right now, listen to their issues, let them drive the car for a while, and then maybe they'll turn it back over to us. Maybe. I think that's the crossroads we're at. in society at least. I'm not talking about individualized homes, but the way you see companies run, the way you see, like, it's hypersensitive, bro. It's hyper sensitive. We live a life now where you literally, if you speak out on the wrong issue in the wrong tone, you can be fired, canceled, or reprimanded. So the dynamic of the relationship with men and women has changed. What I mean by this is, back in the day when men used to have, like, I guess when, let's say, call it 20 years ago, when all of this was just, they didn't care about what girls really felt about in the workplace. I think it's probably changed even before that. I guess. Let's just say the workplace before that. If you walked around and said to another dude, "You're a fucking idiot," that wasn't a problem. Am I correct?
I mean, for the most part.
Yeah. Now we're in, because the female and the sensitive dynamic runs the industry and all industry. You say some shit like that, you're liable to get punished. And I'm just talking about even if you say it in a joking manner. We become sensitized. We've taken out that male energy out of everything, and nobody cares.
Okay, so I guess the point in that aspect is like, you know, at what point will society realize that that's almost problematic?
All right, now you're getting to the juicy part. I don't think it will until it's too late.
Well, I mean, numbers do show that things are trending that to a point where it might be a little bit difficult for society to function in the manner in which we're used to if these concepts continue, because if we're creating these environments of oversensitivity, it's going to get in the way of a lot of progress, right? The hyper fairness, the hyper equality, and whatnot. And some of the touch points that I was looking to speak to is that with some trending people like Rello Tomasi and stuff like that, who's trending on social media, advocating that.
I don't know anything about that.
Yeah, so some of he's popping up on the circuit, and he's been on a few things like Fit and Fresh and some other influential podcasters, kind of highlighting hyper misogyny and whatnot, and the trends that women are going after, with how that will impact society now and how that impacts society in future. So I guess I was spinning around to some of the things that we alluded to, right? Because you asked, it was the question was proposed that how that will affect you know, relationships and then ultimately procreation and whatnot, because women already had the what's often coined as the reproduction like cost variable that they had to do with stuff. So like, you know, finding the right man, being able to have kids at the right time, being able to do that, right? And then if we have a lot of this woke culture, especially the feminist push and whatnot, because the feminism has been going on for a while, but some of the things that they're championing and that are designed.
Well, I call it hyper feminism. I think normal feminists laugh at the shit that these hyper people are doing, because I don't even think the original feminists actually care about half the shit.
I mean, I feel like the goals have changed, the goalposts have moved, and traditional feminists were just looking for a certain degree of equality, or just the ability to participate in
have the lines be fair. Yeah.
Well, yes, to participate in various conversations and be taken in consideration. And to a certain extent, society has opened up the doors to those things, right? Like women are capable of going into the workforce without any real objections. They're being represented in politics. They're being involved in a lot of decision-making processes, especially when it comes to finances and the engagement. So there has been an improvement in regards to overall status, but then I guess the hyperfeminism, like coming on and saying, we don't need men, or we are in a position to be free of men and whatnot. And that proposes some interesting questions, because it's just like, you want to be strong, independent women, but it's kind of like, do you really understand what you're being independent of? And what are you being independent of? Because in most aspects of society, there's not really, and this might get some controversy and might get things. So, like, by all means,
we're here for it.
Put your opinions in the comments in regards to how you feel on the following statement. But in regards to getting liberation from something, it's kind of hard to understand what women are trying to be liberated from, because there's two schools of thought that are going on, and they're both very extremist. There's the women that are like, I don't need no man, and they want to be disconnected from it, and they're pursuing certain things, where they're saying like masculinity is toxic, and they're championing all these statements to the point where masculinity is being eroded. Going back to your original statement on how you've commented on being influenced by women, and if it wasn't for the male female influences that you had, you would have run risk of being more sensitive than you already are, which is questionable. But with that being said, it proposes a question of being like, well, what are you fighting for? Were you fighting for equality or the complete eradication? Yeah.
No. I think because that's what the reason why I asked that is, because I don't think we've reached to a level playing field by any means considered. Because there's certain things that there's flat out countries and places where women still aren't on equal platform. Like when regards to the world, we're not equal. Let's just be honest. We're just not. But bringing it up and carrying certain champions of other women, and certain in the free world, they are inspiration to others. So we're taking that out of consideration. But the women that we're talking about are the overly aggressive ones. The one that, even though they've gotten what they want to push the envelope even further. And that to me is dangerous, because once you start caving into somebody on all of their demand, like, here's the thing about negotiation, somebody told me. A negotiation and in a contract, both people need to be unhappy about what's about to happen. They need to be a certain level of this.
I mean, I don't even know if it's a win thing. I think it's just that all these things, they kind of got lost in the sauce, right? Because
True.
Like, I have to question on some of the components in which there certain women are trying to seek their independence to the point where they're eroding the value of men, and putting it into the situation. And I guess it's just an opinionated aspect, because
that's all we got.
No, because it's kind of an oxymoron in most cases. If you want to be equal, then the roles should be equal in all aspects. So it kind of even goes back to your opening statement of saying how, like, the little 14-year-old girl should have the opinion of saying, I'm in a position to pay. There's the idealistic aspect should be, both parties are capable of being on the same playing field, but also recognizing that there's certain components that each party brings to the equation. And with the three pillars that are kind of happening when it comes to the feminist movement, I use the term loosely because I don't know what else to call it, but we have like, the women are sitting there, and the ones that are championing, I don't need no man, I can go and be independent, stuff like that. Great. I'm not here to discredit you.
No, we saying good. Do you think?
I'm not here to discredit you in entering the workforce, pursuing a career, doing things that are goal-oriented, fulfilling, and getting what you need. But that shouldn't be at the expense of other women and ultimately other men, right? And then putting yourself at a unfavorable aspect, because it impacts a lot of things. But let's just get to the three pillars first. So there's that. There's the women who are kind of exploiting the ability to be like, all right, because we're engaging in a hypersensitive, hyper consider equality aspect, that you know, I should be treated differently and not be treated in a situation of being like battle of the fittest, but
But
everybody
how is
wins.
equal? But here's what I only ask one question on that. How is equality being treated differently? See, that's the statement I always ask. Like, all right, I'll take one example. When I was at work one time, there's this big ass machine. To do that job, a part of the job is being able to clean that machine,
Mm-hmm.
right? They hire mainly women to get into that job because they're the only ones that can fit in those small areas. Unless they can find smaller dudes to fit in those machines.
Okay.
But 9 times out of 10, when they come to run those machines, there's always dudes who have to be there to help them do all the other jobs. And I always ask, like, we're cool because we're the only we're physically capable of doing it. But what
Mm-hmm.
I always ask in this is, how is this job specifically, or how are you as skilled as the guy next to you if you physically can't do the job? So you got to be treated differently in some regard. So how is that equality?
Well, yeah, and that's kind of the point that I was alluding to, right? It's that whole infamous like same but different, right? And there's people who are pushing against that aspect and saying, no, we're not going to recognize the difference, and come to terms with it. Not saying that there's a lesser or greater than, it's just the
Mm-hmm.
capabilities that become associated with it, right? So, you know, those things need to be really put into perspective when it comes to how we move forward, because there, like I said, there's a lot of problems with the woke sensitivity, and like there's a lot of movements that are kind of derived from each other, and it's kind of causing problems. I remember the conversation that I was following up, and they were making reference on how you know, the hyper feminist agenda is being applied to a lot of stuff in media, and media influences life, so life kind of gets impacted by it, and it's becoming problematic, right? Like you alluded and saying how, you know, males are coming up being very sensitive as a result. You know, before men, when it came to like the you know, the hyperbole and, you know, the push to get engaged with people and the incentives and the desires, they were already fragile as it was, right? Like
True. True.
and it's kind of ironic because in all the times where like women are sitting here and saying we're fighting for feminism and whatnot, and they're championing statements and being like, we don't need no man, we don't want to be dependent on a man, the first question is kind of like, at what aspect were you really dependent on,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because, you know, as much as a man would sit there right now and say, hey, you know what, I know who I am as a man, whether or not you're a sensitive man or a toxic hypermasculine man, you still recognize who you are as a man. And there's very
Mm-hmm.
little statements where a man will turn around and say, there's never a scenario where I need a woman, right? Or sorry, I don't need a woman.
I don't need it. I was about to say, you might
Right.
want to adjust that one.
So, you know, like it's amazing how they're
I
pushing
think we've
back.
been raised differently, though.
No,
I think we've been raised.
it has nothing to do with race. It's just general. And a societal standpoint,
No, but that's what I'm talking about. I think it's the generalness of the society. I think the society has changed in a bit. What I mean is, me and you and guys that are all thinking are considered old school now, bro. Half of these dudes nowadays are with the shit. They don't want to do any of the work. You know how many of these dudes are fine saying that they were good with, like, I asked a question one time in a chat room. How many of you are good with your wife doing all the chores? You know how many of these, like, and most of the guys were like 17, 18. Like, it was my cousin's group of friends. And just as a random question, I just asked them, how many are good with your girlfriends doing your chores? How many of them are like, yeah?
okay. So isn't that
In
kind of
our bro, in our dynamic, that would have never happened. Would have never been letting nobody do our shit. That would have been weakness.
I mean, I guess. I'm just really lost on the point that you're trying to highlight, because like we were just literally saying that like there's not very many situations where a guy will sit there, past, present, and probably in the near future will they'll sit there and say, I have absolutely no need for a woman. Absolutely, there's no need.
No,
There's no
I don't think that exists to us even now.
past, present, and near future. So yeah,
True.
now presidents now. So with that being said, what I'm saying is that it's interesting how, you know, in under the muse of the feminism and saying, hey, all these things line up to being feminist, it's kind of like, why are you pushing so hard to render the male or the concepts of masculinity mute, right? Like
That's a good question.
masculinity shouldn't only be associated with the
Toxicity.
right, and the egregious behaviors of men, right? Masculinity should be associated with everything that comes with it, because it's just like, okay, femininity, like, you know, we can allude to it being like soft, gentle, this, that, right, tay, but like, you know, there's certain qualities that come to it, and even to a certain extent, it's not like a lot of those things are undesirable. Like a man might criticize and being like, "Oh, you're too sensitive," or like you're too needy, but at the same token, it comes in as being a positive, right? Like if you need
but
someone,
those are varying degrees. Men only complain about degrees of how much you give. Like I don't think a man is going to eliminate that one aspect, like the neediness. We kind of want a woman to, like, at least for, I can't speak for all men, but I'm saying you want your woman to need you.
well,
You
yeah,
know what I mean? You want some degree of neediness.
well, yeah, and like you want some, but it's kind of like there's always two sides of that. Like there's a dependency versus a desirability, clingy versus, you know, actual like beneficial. So yeah, it's always a touchy thing, but you're right. Most guys appreciate having that degree of need and being valued and whatnot, and I'm quite certain women feel the same way. But it's just like, I think that what makes it a little bit difficult and it confuses a lot of things is because um in challenging the social order, if you will, and saying that um roles need to change and stuff like that, it's just like, why are these things being at risk of aspects? And it's just making it so difficult, right? Like there's never been
no, that's very true.
like you the equivalent of women challenging who they are is the odd time when they're being referred to as like a tomboy, right?
True.
And to a certain extent, I feel that when a woman's a tomboy, they're putting certain things on pause, right? Like, okay, so you're not.
Nah, push back on that. Some girls are just like that, just built like that.
But that's what I'm getting at, right? Like, you're not completely abandoning being a woman, right? You're just exhibiting male mannerisms, and it's like, it might be a behavioral trait or it might be how you dress and whatnot, but it's possible for you to revert back when necessary or over time, because there's a lot of girls who either they start a tomboy and they finish a little bit more feminine, or a hyper like a hyper hybrid, sorry, of the two. But there's never been a situation where it's just like you're being forced to forego your femininity, right? Like
I would, yes, I'll agree with you on. I won't agree 100% on what your whole statement on that will, but definitely that part I'll 100% agree with you.
no,
I don't think there's a societal point where they're make them abandon their need to be their feminine side. Like I don't think there's an assault on that in all.
I strongly believe that there isn't. There's in all the time where women have been oppressed by men and stuff like that and blah blah blah. There's never been a situation or a time where it says you need to be a man. Like even, like it's usually situational, if anything. Or, like if you're hanging out with a bunch of people and the majority of your friends are men, then you'll see a woman be a little bit more tomboyish, right? To be a part of that clique or that tribe or that group.
True.
If you're going to war, you might see a woman or police or state of authority. They may assume certain male attributes, but they've never been told to give up their femininity, right? So
I see your point.
It's kind of funny that during this whole push where certain things are important, like being treated fairly, you know, women not being sexualize or harass
Over sexualized.
or no, yeah, I guess so. But like, I mean, sexualized in regards to being like, at work, cat calls, that kind of stuff, that kind of inappropriate behavior, the toxic behavior, being fairly treated and whatnot. I understand those challenges, but I don't understand when the mandate came back and said, hey, you know what, instead of being like, men, tone it down a little, like we ask women to turn it up, turn up the masculinity. They're just sitting here and saying we need to eradicate it, right?
Yeah. I see your point, but here's the question I asked though. I don't think that statement's being made by all women. I think the loud ones who have that ability, the ones that we are talking about, the ones that have to say, champion team, I don't need a man, I think their voice is just a little bit louder than the rest. And the rest are so comfortable in their dynamics and in their situations, they don't feel like they need to even say anything to those women.
Well, if no one's pushing back, then it has the potential of running rampant, right?
Because I think that's what's happened.
It's like, if you're playing a game like the Leafs are playing right now against the Habs, and if one team doesn't show up, the other one wins by forfeit.
True.
Right. So,
and I think that's what's happening on a large scale. I think that a lot of the dynamics of what this feminism argument, or like I said, we're living in an era where men have always taught their daughters to be strong. Men have always sat back and said to their daughters at bar one, you're my princess. I'm the representation of a man. If he's not like me, sweetie, like I'm he shouldn't be even close to you. Don't accept no weak loser coming around you. Men have always been telling their girls that. So the dynamic that they actually lived up to that on such large scale means that there's a bunch of weak dudes out there to some degree.
I mean, I feel like that warning isn't just for weak dudes, right? It's generally being like, you should be treated right and fairly and respectfully.
From jump, yeah.
Right. So the only thing that I'm saying, and that's on an independent aspect, but if we're not addressing the social movements that might become rampant, which is obvious because both
should we discussing it now? It is rampant.
So yeah, because of the fact that there's a lot of things that are pushing norms, and the things that are usually used as anchors or benchmarks or landmarks on what it is to be a man is being eroded, right?
Yeah,
so it's not really a complaint, it's a concern, because there's a lot of things, like even looking at the common trend of gender reassignment. There's a lot.
That's a sticky one right there.
Well, there's a
sticky one right there.
Well, the point that I'm trying to get is that there's a lot of more men that are becoming women than women becoming men.
That's what but that's why I was saying to you, that's exactly why I think it's a subject, because I don't think it's one of those situations where, like, I know, like, I'm not going to air out names, but I've known somebody who took, like a woman who took that other end of the story, who went that way.
Okay.
And here's the thing. We've always known that wasn't something that just like came out of nowhere. Like she was always that way. And the reason why I may bring up that point is that, like you said, that you didn't think that was a norm or that was a practice that you see all the time. And I didn't think that until I had a conversation with her. She says, this shit's been happening since jump. Until you know somebody or until you're in that field, it does not perform. And that's the only reason why I brought that up, because those points or those women that you see doing gender reassignment, or all of those people, like they're on both sides. They're just not known. They hide themselves in plain sight a lot of times. So you don't even know what's going on. So I don't even know the numbers on it.
Okay.
I'm just.
Anyways, what I was saying was the fact that I feel that there's a lot more men becoming women because of the fact that, like I said, masculinity is being compromised. We're being in a situation where not only are we on one spectrum being told that exhibiting certain traits of being a male is problematic, right?
True.
Like, a guy, guy can go out and hit on a bunch of girls, and you think he'd be like he's doing his job to try and court women, ensuring the human race, participating in reproduction, all the biological and primal aspects of it. But depending on how he goes about the women, it could be viewed as he's being very misogynistic, right? He's going out and treating women inappropriate. Sure. So as a result, you're having that influence the majority of people, because even though it doesn't impact you directly, you see the potential fallout and you start questioning things. Then you come in from the other spectrum and being like, okay, you're hearing that you should exhibit your feelings. More men are being told that they should be in touch with their feelings and be able to communicate in that aspects, as opposed to being aggressive. Yes, I can see the value of reducing the degree of confrontational, but again, that's another component of men being men, dealing with their stuff in a more physical aspect, as opposed to having it fester. Because honestly, I'd rather have a beef with a bro and be like, I know we reached the line when we scrap, right? And I'd rather have that, because it's a direct, instant, in a sense, physical representation of the limits, but it also gives you an opportunity to address the situation.
True. I think you're 100% right.
Versus a woman in some aspect, and again, not trying to sound sexist, but we all know, generalized speaking, either these feelings will manifest and it'll infect the individual internally, and it'll turn into how they deal with people directly or indirectly, either the individual in question or people as a whole, or
people around them.
It will continue impacting them and having compound effects throughout the rest of the duration, whether or not that person exists, right? True. So you can run into a situation 10, 15 years later and be like, oh, the reason why I treat Becky like this is because she did this, and be like, I didn't know, and be like, well, because it just festered, as opposed to actually getting a physical
dealing with the situation when it happens.
Being like, yo, I'm not happy with what you are doing. Okay, me going forward, I know not to do that. Or, yo, I'll stand up for the grounds and counter with, whether or not it's physicality or just a general conflict, those things are gone, right? So as a result, there's less people that are being appropriated when it comes to the gender roles, and they're being even championed to consider the other, right? There's more women who are changing their sex, or sorry, more men changing their sexes to being women, either just in general because they feel in that aspect, or even it's just being provocated and stuff. Like, we're having that trend in sports and whatnot, right? USC, basketball, wrestlers, tennis, where it's just like, people are jumping ships, and it's just like, all right, cool. Like, why is
this trend acceptable?
Yeah, and it's kind of like not questioning. If you feel like a woman, go ahead. Not challenging that aspect, but why is there such an influx of that now? And why is it that, instead of, if these feminists are sitting there and championing and saying, there should be different variations of men, then it should be championed saying, it's okay for you to be sensitive. You can still maintain a certain degree of masculinity, but let's include that. Let's improve it. Like, it's
why
like,
isn't it? I'll add to that. Why? Sorry, I can add to that. Why is there no evenness? Why is it not okay for men to be sensitive, but also men to be aggressive?
That's what I'm getting.
Why is there? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think I wanted to add to your point. Yeah.
Why does there have to be a tit for tat? Like, if we're going aspect and men are just like, yo, stop being so sensitive. I need you to be a little bit more direct and impactful. It's not sitting here saying, I want you to give up your femininity in order to do that. It's just like, can we tack it on, right? And it's funny how from the male aspect, it's saying you have to trade in your man card in order for you to be socially acceptable. And it's impacting a lot of things, right? Because, people are becoming more emotionally driven. Things are becoming more sensitive. There's even the things where it's just like this cancel culture going on. It's just like this has only been provocated lately because this, in a sense, feminine influence is kind of going in, and it's associated with emotion, which therefore is creating this woke culture, which is helpful in some aspect because it's bringing awareness on importance on subjects that should be important, but also it's making things a little bit too yeah, there's too many provocations, right? Like, yeah, we're not allowing for like the evolution and the growth of stuff. It's like everything needs to be swapped out. Like, like
we just want instant ramen noodles when it comes to culture. We don't want to let it marinate. We don't want to spend any time on it. We don't even want to learn from it. We just want it now.
Well, that's a different conversation in regards to instantaneous gratification. But it coupled with things being triggered and being emotionally driven is problematic, because a lot of these things are saying, okay, I'm offended by something. Okay, you're offended by something. Let's have the conversation. Let's put in the work. No, it's I'm offended, but I want instant results. Right?
Yeah, they just want to get rid of it.
These two things are problematic, and no one's kind of adding a stopgap and saying, whoa, wait, we need to understand what's happening so we don't come into a situation where we're swapping things out so quickly to the point where no one's paying attention.
Here, I got a question for you. I think that I don't know if I'm correct in this thought or not, but here's a question. Is it because these things are being led by social media? Is it because there's a lack of maturity behind the drive of social media? Like, there's not a lot of old people on social media really voicing their opinion. I think to the degree where it's mainly an 18 to 25-year-old like game. Like, is it because the fact that the hypersensitivity is coming from the fact that it's gear led by kids, or is it a societal? Because that's a real question. Because I think we see all of these things in such a small scope because we have kids all day focused on it. Like, you can turn something viral really, really quick when you're a kid. You've got the time, and you've got the network, and you've got the friends. So cancel culture tagged with that means instantaneous movement.
I mean, that's just a sign of the times, but everything needs to be motivated and derived by something, right? So anything can be communicated, but it's always the core, right? Like you can't I keep pausing because it's such a crude example, but it's going to be as simple. Like it's kind of like the question, guns don't kill people, people kill people, right?
So I hate that statement so much.
It's crude, but it's kind of like, okay, so are you going to blame the internet? Not really, because the internet's only a tool and it's doing what it's being catered to. Yeah. But no one's addressing the core, right? So that statement, as stupid as it, guns don't kill people, people kill people, it's just like, all right, cool. So you're recognizing what the problem is. So let's talk about the people. Well, let's not talk about the people because there's good people and there's bad people. There's always something that kind of pulls away from it, and it's just like it's a necessary evil. So if you're going back to it and we're kind of questioning how things are coming about, and it's funny, like the reason why I brought this up is like I'm hearing Lexi and she was complaining about being like, oh, I'm not cool with that. Guys should be the ones who are proposing and stuff like that. And it's just like, all right, cool. And you saw how we were pushing back and saying,
yeah. We had.
Well, yeah, but for the viewers, again, we're having a conversation on their behalf as well, right?
True. Yeah.
So
I can visually play it in my head.
She kind of tries to walk the line all the time. She's always the champion of saying, oh, I can pay my own way and I'm independent and I don't need a man and blah, blah, blah. But then, when she has her issues, she's quick to complain as opposed to being like, move on and deal with it. So it's just like, if you're prepared to be that aggressive and it comes to society, then you have to be prepared to deal with the situations when they're not in your favor, right? So it's interesting that these people will sit there and ask for fairness, but that one's just like, it's impossible for things to be 100% fair. There always has to be a winner and a loser. Huh?
This is not the first time, though. We've had the same exact discussion on remember remember our old podcast, we had the same discussion where we proposed that exact same scenario. Remember about the garbage? Remember about the garbage? And remember the instant response where they said that, all right, sorry, let me paint the situation for our viewers. Basically, for our old podcast, go back and watch that episode, where we said that is it a man's job to do certain things in the house? But then when the man rebuttals that it's your turn to do your part of that equation, women always push back and say, no, it's not. Things have evolved past that. But why do you expect the man in your life to do those things in the old school then?
Right. So it's going back, and that's why I was talking about the three pillars of the feminine movement, and the fact that because of the fact that they're all inconsistent and they're not really talking to each other. One, it doesn't make sense, and two, it's provocating for a lot of problems. And it's like women and certain men will complain now that men are just sitting on the sidelines, and it's just like, well, of course they are, because everyone's making all this noise, especially the ones that are influenced right now and what's trending. And it's just like, well, there's no clear distinction on what the roles are going to be because it's confusing. Women, like I said, they are not being told to give up being women. No way, right? If anything, they're being more empowered with choice, right? You can be a traditional housewife, or you can be a Fortune 500 woman, right? There might be,
Sorry, no, I was just saying, they're like, do what you want.
Right. There might be the odd man that might sit here and say, I want a traditional woman, or I'm okay with a baller woman, blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, all right, cool. There'll be men to sign up for each one of the camps. If you're not cool with the man saying, hey, I'm team CEO versus team HOME, you could switch, right? But it still exists. And as a woman, they can switch too, right? If they want to sit here and say, yo, I'm tired of being CEO or go-getter woman, I want to kind of settle down, slow down, they can revert back to their traditional ass roles. And then it'll be like, all right, cool. No one's going to bat an eye. Or if a woman's sitting here and saying, I'm tired of being a homemaker, I make really good muffins and I can make it into a business, no one's going to sit here and say, no, you can't do it. So women, you have what you've asked for, a certain degree of equality in society to kind of say, yes, I can make choices. And the majority of people won't say shit about it. Right? You're good to go. But the problem that I'm saying is that when certain women are coming back and saying, hey, is it cool for them to propose? Is it cool for us to pay? Is it cool for us to do this? Is it cool for us to do that? It's cool for us to wear the pants. It's just like, well, that's the byproduct of you asking for these equalities to the point that you push for it. Because no man, in a sense, I'm going to say this crudely, asterisk, was saying, here's the keys to the kingdom. We didn't really say that. You just kept beating down on our wall and we're like, all right, cool, do what you want, right? And then, there was a subsect of the group saying, okay, we want it all, right? And it's just like, all right, cool, but then are you not seeing what's happening to the future of society, right? Like you're getting more rebellious behavior and you're saying hyper masculinity, obviously, because there's a preservation group that's saying, hey, there's certain things that make man a man, and you're taking those away, as opposed to saying, be a man.
And going for
it. You're not asking for the evolution of men. And it's going to the point where it's just like, women are complaining and saying they don't have influence. That's bullshit. Women, you have influence from the beginning of society. Some of the strongest women have influenced the greatest kings and the greatest leaders. You see it all the time when it comes to movements. Men often console with their women to kind of help drive them where it is. You guys are the homemakers.
I'll add to that.
You guys are like, the matrimonials and all that sort of stuff. So you're there. Even when it comes to statistics today, in society, women influence, I think, over 70% of finances when it comes to stuff. And you do it on both sides, right? If you're a traditional ass woman in the household, you're influencing where expenses go. Hey, we need a new washing machine. Hey, these bills need to get done. You're involved and engaged, even when it comes to leisure aspect. Like, hey, like, bro, I'd like to go out and buy a new car. I'm looking at the new super fast LX6. And it's usually the wife that comes back and says, that's impractical. Let's get an SUV. Right?
Yep, I'll add to that. Like, I want to buy a car. I say to my wife, yo, these are the things I want to buy. 9 times out of 10, she will tell me, this is the one you want. And I'll go, okay, because she knows me and she knows that I've already made the decision about the cars I want. I'm just looking to where to narrow it down. So she's that final decision a lot of the time.
Bet. Okay. So it's already kind of set up and ingrained that there's going to be engagement. And then on the flip side, you know, the women who are making a lot of money for the most part, like, you think about it this way. Most guys who want money, not necessarily want money from themselves per se, right? They don't want money for their boys per se. They want to kind of uphold a certain lifestyle, and part of it's influenced by the people in which you have, which in subsets is a woman, right? Like, if I make a lot of money, bro, that doesn't benefit you, fams, right? Like, you'd be like, yeah, my boy Rohan has bank. You know what? Like, every now and again he invites me on a trip or goes on a vacation. He says, yeah, come along, you know, subsidize. That's cool. That's beneficial. But on the day to day, the person who's going to directly benefit from my finances
is your spouse.
Is my spouse. So
I'm not with you. I see where you're
if there's a component on the type of woman I want, and I know that money is a variable in not only the desire they want, but the lifestyle in which we want to have, then bam, you're already there in the equation without even knowing. And then subsequently, there are women who say, because I am a certain caliber of woman, blah, blah, blah. Even in general, like, you know, the how society is developed and being like, women are, men become, right?
Ooh,
so
that's a good one.
Yeah.
On a shirt.
So if you look at that aspect, yeah, the women are who they are across the board. Yeah, there's a couple of women who grow and develop and become like certain things, but in general, society doesn't ask women to become anything. And yeah, I'm going to be ostracized with that statement, but it's true. Right?
They're going to kill you in the comments. Remember, I had nothing to do with that one.
But in a general, but even in the conversation, like, there's no expectation for women to become anything. We say they can, right? Like, as a woman,
I think that's a part of the societal issue, though. Is I think that's one of the things that no, I'm just taking this from the female perspective, where I hear a lot of them say that society doesn't expect anything of us, and not to mention they won't aid us because they don't expect anything of it. So, like, I hear both sides. Like, I'm only gonna add this one piece of pushback to it. I understand that the reason why we are in the systematic problem that we are in right now is because we are not both being equal. That's the problem I see on both sides. I see that before this all being recognized as hypersensitive or this hyper male aggressiveness all started, male had the run. We had the ball, and we were being very unfair with that ball. And we didn't care about sharing that ball, and we wanted the ball to ourselves. Now women are acting the exact same way when it comes to all of their issues. They want the ball, and they don't give a crap who wants to take it back from them. They now want the damn ball. And I'm just saying, the aggressive ones, the ones that we see, team champion, I don't need a man. It's because they've been conditioned to think that that's the only way to live. So part of that nature, like, think about that. You have women who get into get into relationships, have babies, and then literally one of three things happen from my understanding. They have a bad situation. The guy's a moron. He's an idiot. So they have to get rid of him, and then they have to raise that child on their own. And then they realize it's only me. Or they get into a situation of manipulation where they can push that man away, and then it's team only me. Or the third thing, it's a complicated one, and there is no like answer to it. It just keeps coming back and forth. They keep playing each other, blah, 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 blah. But I only add to this of why we're having this issue is because both sides don't want to chill. They both want what they want. I don't think.
Go ahead.
Sorry, yeah. I don't think we're in a situation where, I think the situation we're in right now is because the hyper aggressive women have just tried to follow the same male playbook that they've been witnessing. They think that that's the way to win.
What?
For them.
What are you talking about? I'm
saying the reason why you see there's no compromise in today's culture. I think they're at the point where, because that we've gotten to a point of they're making most of the decisions now. They're at society's hold right now. Most of the women and most of the like power structure and the way we look at things, most of the women are making the decision. They've gotten to a point of not only being equal, but in a position of power. And a lot of them aren't willing to let it go, man. They're not willing to make it equal again. They want it to stay that way, even if it's a detriment to society.
I mean, yeah, we could just.
That's what I'm saying. I'm just saying. I'm adding to your point. I think
that's what. Yeah, we can just sum it up as being like a little drunk with power. They don't really understand the aspects of it, and it's just like when you have two dominant forces trying to make sense of the situation.
Yep.
Yeah, it becomes problematic, and it's obvious, right? Like they're saying certain countries are actually witnessing a decline in birth rates. There's a lot more people who are starting later in life, partially because of finances, but also because of those aspects. And yeah, it's making it problematic. I was even reading something and saying, as an investor, that if you want to make money in the future based off the stats, you'd invest in things that a single woman over 35 would be interested in.
No, bro, you want me to add to that? There's a statistical model that I was actually watching that said that because right now, the reason why we have a 3-to-1 and almost pushing to a 4-to-1 ratio of men taking war and because we haven't had any major big wars in the last 20 years. There's not many huge world war conflicts where a large scale of men have been invested in killing each other. So why haven't the numbers increased? Like, so that was why, that was one of the reasons for the study. And it led to the fact that women just aren't into relationships now. They're not into the traditionalism of a family. They're not even into the traditionalism of actually becoming, like, you know how many women say they don't want kids nowadays?
Well, yeah, and it's because of the fact that there's a gender shift where we get that. So, I don't know. They're
starting to think like us. Remember how we said on the last show that men don't see the benefit of marriage? I think women are starting to think the same thing about kids. They don't see the benefit of it to some degree.
I don't think it's as strong as that statement. I think it's only because of the fact that if the women are being influenced and saying, in order for you to be a strong, independent, modern woman, and it goes back to the statement of saying, understanding that it's an add-on, not a replacement, that some women are like, why should I give up where I'm at? In doing so, I'm regressing back to the state of being passive or submissive woman or whatnot, right? Because, like, yeah, there's a lot of things in this because of the fact that with more of these people sounding the alarm and saying, hey, you know what, the new feminism is being able to be independent of men and being strong enough. So, like, it's creating two things. It's like independent of men. So the thing that you need a man is for procreation. So if you ultimately sit there and say, I'm writing them off entirely, then that is a variable that's not being taken there too, right? Because obviously,
I'm only laughing because it's just funny to hear it explained.
Yeah, and then obviously, because in most cases it's difficult, it's secular, because it's just like a strong, independent woman wants to be independent of all aspects, including getting into that kind of relationship and having someone dependent on them. But they also recognize that taking care of a child is very difficult as a single woman. It's not impossible, it's done, but it's hard. So at some point,
being single, anybody's difficult.
Right.
Like single father, single anything.
Yeah, but the thing is that men aren't worried about having kids in that aspect, right? When we have kids, it's like we already know that we need a woman to have a kid. So again, because men are never championing strong, independent man, I don't need a woman, it's never in our dialogue. We might sit there and say, yeah, we may not view women as equals, or we want them to maintain a role of subservitude, because it's advantageous for us, but it's not something that completely derails that component, right?
True.
But for a strong independent woman, it's just like, I can't be a strong independent woman, and that's just like, I can't be. So based off of procreation, and we should tail off soon because I know your internet connection being compromised, and plus this is getting long because this conversation can go on forever.
Ain't that the truth?
So based off of tribal aspects, a woman's always going to look for a strong suitor, right? So obviously,
we call it the ring phenomenon, me and you.
No.
Ball ring, remember?
Stop with this. No, stop with this. Oh, you're always going to look for a strong suitor because of procreation, how we were raised, right? Strong survives and animalistic behavior, right? So if a woman's at this level, then all the candidates that she's looking for needs to be above her. So regardless of whether or not you're a regular woman or a strong independent woman, you're always going to look for someone above you. It's very unlikely that you're going to find someone that's an exact equal to procreate with, because it diminishes your chances of your offspring to survive, right? So it's that statement alone is contradictory, because if you're a strong independent woman and you see yourself above men, then you're never going to be in a situation say, I'm going to procreate down. Speaking of procreation, there's yours.
I know, that is a perfect time.
So to procreate down in order to engage in a component of life. So that's why that's being written off in a sense. Right? And yeah, because of that. So there's that aspect. And even if she says, hey, fine, I don't need a man, I'll just use them for a second for in vitro fertilization and cast them off, right? Then you're stuck dealing with the situation on your own, which you either have to be a very strong independent woman to be like, yeah, on top of that, I'm going to take care of this child 100% without looking for someone else, or ultimately take on, like, contradict that programming and say, I can be a strong independent woman, but I need a man. It's just like, then stop saying you're a strong independent woman. You can just be a strong woman, right?
Well, I think that's also the problem, is that that's the definition of that statement, is the oxymoron in itself, is that you can be strong and then you have a need to be so independent that you're taking at risk to everybody else. So that's half the problem. I don't think a lot of these girls as a whole take it into consideration that at some point in time they're gonna need a man. Like when they make that statement, I don't think they made it. They put it as a whole realization that at some point they're gonna need.
Anyways, speaking of needs, it looks like you're needed. So I guess
we're going soon anyway. Yeah, I gotta go give him a bath, and he's waiting for me to be. He's beating me up because he's waiting for me to go get juice.
Yeah,
but it's all good.
Yeah, so definitely, as always, I appreciate us having this conversation, and it's definitely a point. We appreciate you watching our show and engaging in our ramble. Sometimes we say good shit. Most of the time, it's just shit. But yeah, we appreciate you guys sticking through and joining us whenever you can. We still want you to like, subscribe, and share our content, because as we grow, it'll give us a reason to talk more and maybe improve the quality of our programming to the point where it's like, hey, I remember those guys when they were on the come up. We've come a long way, but there's definitely more ways that we can go. But yeah, if you guys have any ideas for topics, if you want to kind of outsource, if you want to be on our show, we're not averse for having people, right?
I'm actually thinking of doing a little segment called Fran Friday, where you guys write into us and send us your topics, and maybe we'll, go over them on a show the next day.
Depending on scheduling. But it's a great idea. There's a lot of things that we're still stirring in the pot, but by all means, like I said, thanks for sticking with us, and yeah, we'll catch you on the next episode of Double S Club. Hopefully we'll have Miss Lexi with us, but if not, we can handle it. Like, I know how to work this thing. I know how to make it do stuff.
He be pushing the buttons. My mom says I'm cool.
My mommy says I'm special.
And until next time, please take care of yourselves, take care of the ones you love, and always like, subscribe, and share. Thank y'all for being our friends.
All right, cool. All right, Andrew, I'm gonna see if I can make sense out of that foolishness that we were doing.
I think you can cut it because there's certain parts where we were talking about like where we were actually asking them to like, subscribe, and share. There's areas where you can like cut the first one, like that first 15 minutes. I think there's an area where we were talking some good mess there. You can cut it into like a little thing.
Yeah, we'll see.
Okay.
Anyways, I'll let you go do that. I'm kind of hungry myself, so.
Yeah. Ali Oxenfried.
All right, later, bro.
Peace out.